Welcome to Tampa's Table, a culinary journey. I'm Jeff Hauk. I'm Vice President of Marketing for the 1905 family of restaurants, and today I have as my guest Richard Hales, owner and chef at Hales Blackbrick. Welcome.
Hello,
Great to
Jeff.
have you here today.
It's awesome to be here. Thank you.
So I wanted to talk to you for a long time because we crossed paths when you were coming to town,
Yes.
and we crossed paths after you got to town and I ate at your restaurants. I'm going to ask you for a secret recipe on camera because you
Sure.
can't deny me. But anyway, I love watching your journey through Tampa because it's a hometown, but then it's a new town and it's a
Right.
return and everything. Tell me a little bit about growing up in Tampa because there aren't many people who have high-end restaurants who then go on to open something in their home base.
Well, since I was a kid, I wanted to own my own restaurants. There was nothing else that I wanted to be a rock star and a race car driver, but
They're actually making those these days, I believe.
yes, I wanted to cook my entire life. There was never a moment in my life that I didn't want to cook. And then, I was here in Tampa, and as I started to, as a teenager, never really talked about it because at that time, it wasn't cool to be a chef.
Sure.
Especially
Not in Tampa.
Not in Tampa. And then when I was in my early 20s, I owned a Cuban bread delivery company, and I used to buy from Seth's Bakery, from Calupa's, from Faedo's, and I sold Cuban bread. And I picked up Marty Blitz as an account to sell him
At Mise en Place.
at Mise en Place.
Right.
And I walked into Mise en Place, and I used to in the morning, and I would see them prepping, and I would see Marty like yelling at people and talking to me, and I just remember his like confidence, like bravado, like in the kitchen, and him doing things. And I said, oh, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to do. So I started dreaming, and then my dad wanted me to be a lawyer. I was at USF in the business school, and I thought, okay, when I become a lawyer, I'll make my dad happy. My mom is Filipino. She wanted me to be a doctor, or a nurse, and my dad wanted me to be a lawyer, and I wanted to cook. And
No pressure.
no pressure at all. So anyways, I said, when I win the lottery, this is my mind at the time, I will open my own restaurant.
Sure.
I will be a lawyer. And then I just realized I was sitting here. I lived in Hyde Park, and I said, you know what? Why wait? Why wait? And I started to look up culinary schools. I found the French Culinary in New York City.
Right.
And I talked to a friend of a friend that had gone to Johnson & Wales in Miami, and they said, don't come here, go to New York.
Sure.
And I left, and I sold it to my mom, and I said, Mom, I will be back. This was in 1997. I said, I will be back in 1 year. I'm going to go to the school. I'm going to come back. It was only 9 months. And then I'm going to open a restaurant here. I promise. And I wanted to go out because in 1993, I had gone to New York City. I'd seen what Marty was doing. Then I'd gone to New York City in 1993, and I was eating in restaurants in New York City. And I said, the Tampa needs to be like this. This is my mind. I was like, I want to bring this back to Tampa. And it took me 24 years from
Well,
1997.
everybody needs a goal.
Yes, to come back.
Well, the conditions had to be right.
Right. And I just felt like Tampa didn't have anything for me at the time. In my younger, I worked in New York City. I was staging all over Asia.
See, that's the other part of your bio that I'm fascinated by because it wasn't like you just went to one place. You went all over Asia
Right.
and kind of got this experience, the cultural influences and whatnot. And then you were able to bring it back stateside and put that in your toolkit.
Right. So I worked for John George in New York City after culinary school, and he told me, look, you need to go to Asia. I'll connect you with the Mandarin in Bangkok. And I went there, and it honestly wasn't for me. I at the time emailed Jean George, said, I don't think this is the right thing for me. I want to learn on the street. And he goes, well, go learn. Go learn on the street. You need my help, let me know. And so I created a base in Chiang Mai in Thailand. And then I would go to Malaysia, Singapore, Indonesia, Bali, and just keep doing this loop. I think it's called the Banana Trail now. Somebody asked me, have you ever been on the Banana Trail? And I was like, never heard of it. And then I realized that I was doing the Banana Trail. And So I went to hundreds, if not thousands of places, and I would just eat somewhere for lunch, whatever country I was in,
Sure.
whatever town I was in, and then I would just ask the owner, can I learn this technique on this dish? I'll do whatever." And I was washing dishes, I was painting in some places. I'm 6'4". I was a
You
lot.
kind of stood out in Asia,
Yes.
Richard.
I know in medieval times I would have been like, lifting blocks of ice and pulling carts with my size. But I would just do manual labor for them and do whatever. And I would learn that technique and then I would just move on. I would work for like 2 weeks and then I would just get a guest house wherever I was. And I would just have my bag and I was truly backpacking. And I had a place in Chiang Mai, but it was $3 a day. So it wasn't like, this huge issue of paying for it.
You
And
could
I would,
stretch a dollar.
right. And, some places I'd stay was like $1 or $2. It
Right.
would be like a cot and a shared bathroom, it's something like that. And so I just kept doing that all over Asia. And I did that even when I opened my first restaurant, Sakai Kitchen. And I would still go to Asia. Then I would go a little bit higher end. I'd go to Korea,
Mhm.
I'd go to Hong Kong, and then I did live in Hong Kong for a short time, and that was more difficult. I found that the restaurants in Hong Kong were less willing to let me in on secrets, or let me watch and do things. But in Southeast Asia, I learned quite a bit, and that's why my style is kind of like different because it's a mixture of all those countries.
Sure.
And then I use the pantry of wherever I want to focus on, and then it's my interpretation on top of that. So it's very hard it looks simple, but then it's very hard to follow because I'm very unorthodox at the same time. I was French trained
Right.
at a French culinary school, work for guys like John George and Michelin fine dining. And then I'm doing street food and it's all, and then grew up eating bologna sandwiches and peanut butter and jelly here in Tampa, but with a Filipino grandmother,
Right.
Filipino mother, an Italian father from the Bronx, and being an American, and my mom's doing a continental menu. My grandmother's cooking fish heads and blue crabs and teach me about lumpia. And then my friends are eating Cheetos and bologna sandwiches. And so it was like this mixture. And my dad's mother was a lunchroom lady.
Right.
And she's English and Irish, and she was doing Yorkshire puddings and things like that. So it was just like this.
And there's British influence in HK, I mean, there's
right.
that kind of stuff
for
as well.
sure when I was there because that was
And you have French
1997.
influence throughout Asia because of the French colonization and whatnot.
Right.
So it's almost like Wheel of Culture. You spin it and like, bing, that would
Right.
work on this dish or whatnot. But that gives you an encyclopedic knowledge that a lot of
Right.
people don't have.
Right.
But I want to especially talk about your grandmother. I believe her name is Corazon.
Corazon, yeah.
And what you picked up from her and the food that she cooked here in Tampa that kind of really put the imprint on you.
Well, she grew up, she had a house on Trilby in South Tampa, so we are a South Tampa family, and she was making egg rolls and like selling them. So then that was another lesson for me because I was like, oh, you make money cooking.
Sure.
Right? Like you just don't cook for your family. And she would come, I would always go to her house. And as soon as I got there, every summer I would spend the entire summer with her, and she would have a plate of bacon, a pot of rice, a big pot of adobo, and a box of Twinkies. That was like my welcome to
Which
her
one
house.
did you eat first?
The Twinkies.
Of course
Like
you
it
would.
was,
Of course.
it was a big problem. But she would just give me as much as I wanted. And then she was like crazy. Like
Listen,
she cooked
a
everything.
Twinkie is an egg roll just in a different form. It's just filled with something else. That's all it
exactly.
is. I mean, I saw your sweet dim sum for dessert, and I thought, okay, well, I'd never really considered sweet dim sum. I've
Right.
always had savory.
Right.
And then you say Twinkies, and I'm like, boy, this thing is swirling here. I'm not making the connections, but it's in
Well,
the
even my
neighborhood.
Phoenix bao is a Phoenix bao, which is the custard inside and has the bao dough, but then I do creme brulee
Right.
topping on it. I put the sugar and we caramelize it at the table. So
The secret I'm going to ask you, and we'll get back to more about Hales Blackbrick on Platt, but your fried rice.
yeah, it's a world
It's
of
a
its own.
problem,
It is.
dude. It is a problem. My wife and I went, and we had the stack of dim sum tower, and we had
Right.
all these great dishes. I think baby octopus that day. There was all these great char siu, and the fried rice laid me out.
Right.
So I need to know what's the secret because other than a ton of butter or vodka or whatever it is. It's full of magic, and I'm
Yeah.
not making this up. I don't brag about stuff that I don't believe in, and I brag about this stuff all over town. I'm like, okay, all that stuff is great. It's very inventive. It's very creative. There's a lot of different, cultures involved, but the fried rice.
It is something that I learned. First of all, we do egg thread in it, and if you've ever seen that, that's where you hold the egg canister up, and then you kind of whip it in the wok.
Okay.
It takes a lot of oil to do that, so your eggs are like almost deep fried, and I think that does have an effect since the eggs are laced throughout the oil thing,
Okay.
and we use like a soybean oil on it, but
I'm not going to attempt this, by the way. I wouldn't. It's like going to Disney World and then building your own castle. No, 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 no. I just want to know.
well,
Like,
that's the secret behind all of it is that you have to follow the rules of, sweet and sour, spicy and salty. You have to have that in there, and then you need the umami. So you got to like tick that off, right? And that's what all Asian food is about. Those ratios change, but it's the same formula. It's why you can do 101 Chinese things and they only have like 3 sauces,
right.
So it's just the ratio changes. But that one I will tell you is the tallow. There's tallow in it.
Oh, well, okay. That answers everything.
There's
You should have
tallow
just
in it.
said there's tallow and cut to the
Yes.
chase.
I don't like to tell everybody that.
Oh, it's so good.
Because then some people like yourself will be like, oh, of course, it's so good. But it
But
is,
there's other things in
I
there,
think
obviously.
with like even the new, fast food places changing back to tallow, we use a lot of tallow in my cooking
Right.
because it's healthier and it's got flavor, right? So that is probably the main thing, but it is a very difficult process to use tallow and not be overly oily. But we literally will take every grain and rub tallow on it. I mean, we're talking hundreds of pounds of rice, and each grain gets rubbed with tallow.
See,
It's a very difficult
I have a
process.
problem with rice to begin with because I love it.
I love
And
it
I don't
too.
eat much of it because it's just whatever diet wise. But there was a rice that I had one time down in Sarasota. I think it was JR's Packing House, and it was an old abuela who was the basis for all and she made tons of the food. And I realized that her rice reminded me of the best rice I ever had before your rice, which was the most flavorful. And I'm like, I couldn't figure out what it was. And I asked her, and she goes, pollo. She
Yeah.
takes chicken fat and she
Yeah.
cooks the rice with chicken
Yeah.
fat. And that's the profile. That little bit of fat adds a different layer of flavor to it that gives it depth and dimension. You just can't stop.
So we
eating it.
have the second thing, which I wasn't even going to tell you, but now that you say it,
You don't have to. I mean, we'll edit it out, but
we
I just need
take
to
chicken
know.
skins and we
Oh.
render them,
Oh,
and then we pulverize them into a powder, and that also goes in there. So you're getting the chicken fat. See, people are scared of fat. That's why we don't publicize that,
yeah.
right?
Well, for 40 years, we've been told we're all going to die.
Right. Like, yeah, I'm like eating so much butter now that I'm reading all these reports about statins and your brain and dementia and everything. I was like, we've been lied to.
We have been.
So it's a problem, and people don't understand that, when they used to say fat is flavor and
Right.
all that stuff, that's right. And it's not unhealthy.
Right.
What's unhealthy is all the seed oils that restaurants use. So you know what I'm saying? We're using tallow, we're dehydrating chicken skins and pulverizing them and adding chicken powder to the rice.
I stood no chance. Honestly, there was a book by Jennifer McClagan in the late 2000s, not to name drop, won all the awards, and it just was called Fat. And she was the way I rediscovered the benefits of natural fats.
Right.
And the whole thing you're talking about, saturated fats and all these manufactured fats, and the difference. And I started cooking that way. It just made a huge difference. There was another friend of mine who did an electronic book on schmaltz.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, okay. So we're all talking about the same thing here, which is natural food tastes more natural and better.
Yeah.
And it's better for you, bottom line.
Right.
But it's hard to sustain with the tallow without it getting greasy and things like that.
Right.
Okay. We jumped around a lot and I apologize. How do we get to Hales Blackbrick? And because I know you were up on Dale Mabry for a time, now you're on Platt Street. It seems like a more natural fit. You're back in your neighborhood. How does that evolve? How do you decide to go and make tons of concepts in Miami, award-winning concepts, and get a lot of notoriety for it? What brings you back to Tampa and starting there and then now placing on Platt?
Well, your mind changes, right? When I was 20 something in my 30s, I thought Tampa doesn't offer me anything because my focus was not on, having kids
Right.
and my focus was on like, let me open restaurants, let me travel, let me find food, let's go to Michelin restaurants and all that. And, things change when you have kids. And in 2010, I had my first daughter, was married in 2006, 2010, 2012, my two daughters. And then when COVID hit, we had the best year in 2019. I remember looking back, telling my wife, man, we really done it. Like our revenue was like at 20 million in 2019.
And how many concepts at that point?
That was 4 restaurants
Right.
and 1 licensing and 2 food trucks and a catering business.
Things were
So,
chugging along.
yeah, I told my wife we were finishing the year around 20 million, and we did it, honey. We did it. And then that was December
20
of
million and
2019.
then 2020.
And then, you started hearing the rumblings, of course. And then
Right.
in 2020, in March 23rd, 2020, we went from 20 million to 0.
Yeah.
I said, what can we do? And I just started looking at realtor.com. I started looking at real estate and I said, yeah, look at these houses, the prices in Tampa.
Yep.
I don't know where this West Chase is, but look at the
This
house.
mythical place called West
I know.
Chase.
Look at the house. Look at the size, like 5,000 square feet. I said, look at the house and look at the price. I said, let's just go look at some houses and we'll just buy it and we'll leave it because now we don't have to stay necessarily every time at my parents. We don't have to stay in a hotel. We could just do that. And we ended up buying a house here in July of 2020. And then I said, well, the restaurants are still closed. And I said, Blackbrick's fine. We're running the whole operation with like 1 cook and 1 cashier, and it's takeout and delivery.
You at least have income coming in.
Right. And then I did a lot for World Central Kitchen because I called, I was friends with Jose Andre, and I said, hey, I have 4 restaurant kitchens that are closed if you need help. And they saved my butt because they were paying me about $30,000 a month to provide meals for first responders. So it just kept I wasn't making any money. There was
Sure.
no profit, but it just kept everything going. And then when the landlord stopped, charging rent and so it just went to my staff. And then, of course, everything after that. But I said, let's go. And then we came to the house, we put some inflatable beds, and we were on inflatable beds for like a month or so. And then I told my wife, I think we need to stay in Tampa. I really like it here now. I really like what it's becoming and where it was at and where it's at today. And I just fell in love with Tampa, and I never thought that was going to happen. Living in Hong Kong, living in New York City,
You
in
lived
Thailand.
a lot of places. You had the ability
Right.
to compare. It wasn't like you went to Miami and then just said, well,
Right.
I think we'll go to Tampa.
Yeah, my wife lived in Italy. She lived in London. So we, there was a lot of like comparison, and she goes, I like it here. I don't want to go back to Miami. And she's from Miami. My daughters were born in Miami. And she's like, I don't want to go back to Miami. I want to stay in Tampa. And we did. So
That's
we
awesome.
stayed, and then we saw Pop and Sons for sale. And we thought it was for sale. It was actually a real a government, somebody going for office out in
Right.
the front. And I just sent him a thing through Facebook. I said, are you selling the place? And then I met with Gerald Rivas, the owner for 45 years.
And this is up on Dale Mabry.
On Del Mabry. And he said, I don't really want to sell it. I want my daughter to take it over, but I'll give it to you because my wife's a big fan of you on the Food Network.
Awesome. Yeah, one of the things we didn't talk about yet is you and I have crossed paths with different people. I've met and dined with Chef Jean-Georges
Right.
up in Minneapolis one time when I was a food writer. Fell in love with his food and his whole ethic, and the way he treats people is just tremendous. from my experience anyway. And then you've been on diners, drive-ins, and dives so much that they ought to call it diners, drive-ins, dives, and Hales.
Yeah.
But I crossed paths with Guy Fieri a couple times. It's funny, your style. I once tried to compliment him on a podcast, and I said to you, I told him that he had what I would fondly call attention deficit cooking. He would take a bunch of disparate things and put them together, and it's inevitably awesome. But he doesn't let convention impact his
Right.
curiosity.
Right.
And so when I would see you on diners and drive-ins, because you've been on how many times now? 4 or 5?
Four of my restaurants, but I've been on a dozen times at least,
Right.
either eating with him. I hosted an episode with him or
Right.
co-hosted, and I've been on about a dozen
It
times.
doesn't happen. Okay.
Doesn't
People
happen.
get one shot,
Yeah.
and then, they might hit it off. They might be ready for it because that is an absolute tsunami of customers who come as a result.
Yep.
There's apps that people follow that eat from one place to another. What is it that you picked up from cooking for him and also the experience of being on Triple D and his other shows?
Well, the first and foremost was the respect for marketing, because I was a chef, like, oh, I don't need this,
Right.
whatever. I don't care about anything. It's all about the food, no ambiance, no nothing. And I just, he kind of mentored me. I've been lucky to have him as a mentor, John George as a mentor, so it's like two sides of the spectrum, and then I'm somewhere in the middle of it,
Sure.
right? So I learned that from him, and I learned it from him, like, about marketing. And he sat me down. He said, "Listen, I'm going to tell you, man, your food." Like, Richard, I've been doing this for a long time, and you are the best
He
in the
wouldn't say it if he
country.
didn't mean it.
He would tell everybody
Yep.
this. He would just, like, tell the Food Network people, Scripps people, everybody, this is the best chef in the country. And I was like, well, he's just whatever, and he's a godfather of my kids and everything,
Hmm.
and now he is. We become very good friends. We're actually going to see him tomorrow
That's awesome.
in California. But he taught me that end of it, and you're talking a six-figure bump when the Triple D effect comes in. It's
It is a
not
real thing.
even like the first month, like, you are increasing your business in the six figures. It's a crazy amount of business. He told
Because of the integrity of what he does. He doesn't show stuff that isn't real. If he says something's great and somebody goes and they eat it and it's garbage, then he's
Yeah.
done.
and he and people believe him, and he doesn't say anything bad about anything. He just doesn't show it.
Exactly. And that, when I was a food writer, people were like, "Well, how do you choose?" I go, if I go and I like it, then I'll write about it. The worst thing I can do for somebody is not is write about it and it's terrible. I don't really want to do that. I would rather show people like you and showcase people who are doing really inventive things, because the people who love food really love to go and find these things. So to go back to it, you were up on Northdale Mabry. Now you're on Platt Street. How did that happen, and when did that happen, and what was
Well,
the change, the biggest change?
we opened up on Dale Mabry and the old Pop and Sons, and we were very successful. Like, it was hard to get a reservation. We didn't really have a bar. There was nowhere for you to wait.
Right.
It was an old building, and we were dealing with old building stuff, and we just outgrew it, like, too quickly. And I wanted to do another location, and they had asked me to come to this Platt Street location for about a year,
Right.
and I just was like, "No, I'm not interested. I'm not interested. I'm going to go to St. Pete first." And then they made me a deal that I just couldn't refuse, and I'm gonna end up buying that building too eventually. And I own the first building, and we just outgrew it. And now
It
we're double
happens.
the size,
Yeah.
and then we're double the revenue and on Platt Street. So it's like having two of what I originally had. So that's always a great thing.
Sure.
And I do all the design, so I really flexed on that, where I was happy with the way it came out in the inside. And we have a system that's working, and we have what's called Grateful Hospitality. That's my company.
Sure.
And my staff is, they're people, and this is rare, that I had the core people are all there since day one on Drew Park, and it's a very odd thing to do that in the restaurant business, because people, they just move where the
Yeah,
wind blows.
the hospitality when I've been has been impeccable.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's sort of like, it's almost unnerving to have such a casual yet stylish kind of setting, and then someone is literally giving me something that I would have at a 5-star hotel or resort or
Right.
restaurant, and it's comforting to know people care enough to be professional about front of house.
Right.
You already know that the back of house is really doing some really interesting stuff, but to see front of house as dedicated, that's a
Well, yeah.
circular energy,
And
man.
I would not say this about my cooking, or I would be, more humble with what I input, but I will tell you my staff is the best service in Tampa. There is no, I mean, I'm sorry, not
No,
your
Columbia,
places, but
baby. You know, we gotta
the
respect
Columbia,
Columbia and Eulalie, but I totally
but
understand it. But it feels like a team. It doesn't feel like 2 parts of the same unit.
right,
That's the way it was
right.
to me. They
Yeah,
just seemed like they were extremely warm and personable without being invasive, which is a hard
right,
thing to hit, and then they were unbelievably well-versed on the menu,
right.
and you felt like your visit was being managed and not just produced.
Right. And we care.
Yeah,
It's like there's a whole system, and I let them put their personality in
right,
because I tell them I don't want you to act like me. You act like yourself, but
right.
use my system. I give you my knowledge and all my experience, and I think that's what's made Hales Blackbrick successful. Is people don't readily know. They hear the story. Oh, he traveled in Asia, but they don't understand like the amount of layers that have happened to get to this point, and I think it's really showing here. It's my best effort, this Platt Street one, and I've opened, I don't know, maybe 30 restaurants, 10 or 11 being my own that I've owned,
Right.
and this is the best one. And I got tired of hearing that Kennedy was the Florida Georgia line, and I needed to be on the Florida side of things if I was going to be legitimate in this
Oh,
town.
come on.
I heard that. I didn't make that up.
I listen, I know that sentiment.
Yeah.
But then I look at a restaurant like Somi,
Oh, I love it.
and Somi is ridiculous.
Love
And
it.
then I saw you up on North Tampa, and I don't I love the fact that you're down in your home part of South Tampa,
Right.
and there's a great restaurant audience there. But I love to see it creeping north because it's a natural progression, and there's so much new energy going
I was
north.
very sad to vacate
Yeah,
that spot
sure.
because it in my heart of hearts, I was like, this is New York meets LA,
Hmm.
and it's elevating Tampa, right?
Hmm.
Like go to the worst neighborhood ever and get some of the best food in the city.
Yeah.
Like don't be so obvious. Like Hyde Park is obvious.
Right.
Like we belong. Everybody's like, yeah, you belong here. Yeah, I know I belong here. I want to go where you don't belong. I
Yeah.
called my dad and I said, hey dad, you remember Pop and Sons? And he goes, yes. And I said, I bought the building. And he goes, it was silence. And he goes, why? And then he says, are you sure you know what you're doing, son? And I said, yes, dad, it's time for Tampa to
Yeah.
get out of, what they're used to. He goes, I don't know much about restaurants, but I don't think you're doing it. And a lot of people have come to me since then and
Right.
said, man, we thought you were the biggest fool in town going into that spot to do your fine dining Chinese. And we did very well. Obviously, it was too small for us, but
Yeah, you just outgrew it.
yeah.
Okay, now the hard-hitting questions.
Okay.
What's your favorite Tampa flavor?
I mean, what I crave the most is, the devil crab. I just like it. I'm always on the search for the best one,
Mhm.
right? I love Cubans. I love all of that stuff, but I'm always looking for this. And I'm like embarrassingly, I eat out the Outback a lot. I don't know if I should say
Hey,
that aloud.
Tampa.
I'd like just to go in and have a steak. They don't even know who I am. They
Right,
don't know I
right,
have a
right.
restaurant. Somebody got called me out last night at my restaurant. They said, second time I've seen you this week.
You know, it's funny, I took my wife's convertible one time to pick up Outback takeout. It's fun, it's in the neighborhood and everything, and the ream of you-know-what that I took for doing that, I'm like,
Yeah,
"Everybody gotta eat, baby,"
I know.
And I'm supporting a Tampa company. What are you
I
gonna
know.
say?
When I have all the owners and everybody,
Yeah,
they all come to my restaurant. I mean, they all, it's like everybody I talked to, they were an owner of Outback at one time. And anyways, but I love on the Cuban side, I love to get my wife's Cuban. So, I love to get the devil crab. One of my favorite restaurants, and we mentioned it earlier in the conversation, is Somi.
yeah.
I just love going there.
Yeah.
I love the fact that they went into a place like my place in Drew Park,
Yeah.
and they're making it happen, and they're packed.
Yep.
I love that. That's what we were in Drew Park, and I felt it was much cooler, than Platt Street, but Platt Street, the inside is a lot better. But
It's a natural home for you, I think.
one of the things when I came back was, and you mentioned it earlier, was this is my hometown. This was a new town to me. I was coming back to a new town, and I never thought, "Oh, I'm hometown boy."
Right.
And people really love that I'm from Tampa, and I never calculated that in anything
It's a huge part
on
of
the
it.
way back. And it was a huge part because I've never been the hometown guy. I've always been traveling. And so that was really important to me, and to honor things with Tampa, like I do the mala yuca, because we were close to West Tampa, and I love yuca. And I'm like, that's always like when I eat a Cuban meal, do I want to roll out of here and get the fried yuca to start, or do I just want to go straight for the meal? Things like that. I love simple food. I
Sure.
love diner food. I love going. My first Cuban restaurant was Arcoides in the old location.
Oh, talk about fried rice.
Yeah, and then I remember they were doing the Chinese fried rice and all that stuff. But
So I asked them one time, because I had always heard that it was because of the Chinese influence in Cuba that they were doing that. And I found out what it was one of the family members went and worked at a Chinese restaurant for a summer and brought it back. And they're like, well, we should put this on the menu.
That's
I'm like,
awesome.
sometimes the simple answers are the best answers,
Yeah.
Okay, and last question is, if you had to introduce somebody new to town to Tampa's cuisine, what would you serve them?
Whew, that's hard because where would I go? Because it's tough.
You mentioned Outback, and it's funny because I give them tons of credit and all the spinoffs that have happened, because it created business, it created awareness, and then they trained chefs or they trained cooks, and they went out and and
Right.
they kind of filtered through the ecosystem. I'm not saying Outback is the one. I'm just saying it's hard to pick for me. When people ask me that question, and it's hard to pick for me because Tampa's such a crossroads anyways. Obviously, you're going to go for Spanish or Cuban or something in that realm. But I'm always fascinated to hear what people, if I had to bring a cousin in from out of town, what would I do to
Well, like
baptize them?
the Cuban sandwich, I go to West Tampa Sandwich Shop a
Yeah.
lot. I like going there for a Cuban sandwich. I get my Italian fix and the devil crab from the Cacciatore, but the one in Armenia.
Right.
It's like I'm very specific on which one I go to
Yeah.
because I'm in town and country, but then
You gotta go. You
I
gotta
go
go
to that
OG,
one.
man.
I love Somi for the breakfast, and if I feel like I want to be
The
like,
salmon scrambled
yeah.
eggs at Somi
yeah.
are very close to your fried rice in my heart.
Oh wow,
Yeah, just
I need to get that
devastating.
then.
Devastating.
I need to get that. Awesome.
Thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. We can go on for
Likewise.
days, and I appreciate you being here, and I wish you well with the new
All
restaurant.
right. Well, thank you for having me in.
And thank you for watching Tampa's Table, a culinary journey. Be sure to like and follow wherever you like and follow podcasts, and leave something in the comments about where your favorite devil crab is or where your favorite restaurant is. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you again, and we'll save a seat at the table for you for the next time.